So you want to get a drone, and you're wondering which one is the best, which is the best value for the price, how fancy of a drone do I actually need, what features are important, which ones aren't. It's all pretty confusing. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what features you should look for, what drones can produce footage like what you're seeing right now, and what drone you should get, whether you just want a basic drone to fly for fun or whether you want to shoot professional drone photos and videos. And as you can see, I've got a bunch of different drones here in front of me. And as we go through this, just remember that you can get good shots with any of these drones. The footage that you're looking at right now was shot on the Phantom 3, which is a 10-year-old drone. So with the right skills, any of these more recent drones can produce cinematic results. It's just that some drones make it easier to get professional results than others. So first of all, a couple of general things to keep in mind when buying a drone. So broadly speaking, there's two different types of drones: camera drones like this Air 3S and FPV drones like this Avata 2. Camera drones are very stable. They're fully GPS stabilized. They have a 3-axis gimbal to stabilize the footage, and they're controlled with a little handheld controller with a screen on it like what you see right here. And you're going to use these kind of drones for shooting your typical drone footage like what you're watching right now. And regular camera drones are probably what most of you are looking for when you're going out to buy a drone. Now, FPV drones, on the other hand, you see the camera feed from the drone in goggles like this, and you have full manual control over them. They are a lot harder to fly, take a lot more practice. You actually have to learn in a simulator before you start flying the actual drones, and the cameras on them don't have a gimbal. They're not mechanically stabilized. You just have to electronically stabilize the footage in post, and they're used for getting cool shots, diving down mountains, flying through gaps, flying really fast in close proximity to things, getting that really high energy footage that I'm sure you've seen lots of online. Most FPV drones are built on some kind of a frame. You can either build them yourself or get pre-built ones, but they're not integrated like most camera drones. Now, there are some DJI FPV drones like the Avata 2 that are kind of hybrid. They do have a GPS stabilized mode. You don't have to fly them manually, although you're limited as to what you can do if you're not in full manual mode. But in this video, we're mostly going to be covering camera drones. I will talk about DJI FPV drones like the Avata 2 and Neo at the end of this video. Now, between all of these different camera drones, the main differences are going to be in camera quality and features. They all operate pretty much the same. An expensive pro drone is going to be just as easy to fly as a beginner drone. Is just going to have a better camera quality and more features. Now, that said, with drones, there is a certain price point below which quality just becomes terrible. I got this $139 drone. Actually, some random company off Amazon sent it to me. I tested it out and it was awful. The camera quality is just terrible, and it doesn't even fly anywhere nearly as well as a more expensive drone. About the cheapest drone that will work decently well is the DJI Neo right here. It's about $200 for the basic kit, which actually comes without a dedicated remote controller. We'll talk more about that later, but you've just got to realize that below a certain price point, super cheap drones just aren't worth even getting. And also keep in mind that with any of these drones, you aren't going to be getting as amazing shots as you see in DJI's launch videos if you don't know how to use them properly. So to fix that, I have a completely free 45-minute training that shows you how to get the best results with your drone, and link to that is down in the description. And you'll notice I'm mostly talking about DJI drones. There are maybe one or two other brands that make kind of decent drones. The only one I can think of right off the top of my head is Autel, but all in all, DJI drones are by far the most reliable, the best quality, the best value for your money. And so those are what I'm going to be covering in this video, and that's what I would recommend for both new and even advanced drone pilots. So I'm going to quickly go through the current DJI drone lineup so you have some idea of what we're talking about, and then we'll dive into what features to look for when you're buying a drone, both in the camera and in general features, and then I'll give you my specific recommendations of what drones I would recommend right now at different price points and for different uses. So going through DJI's drones, starting cheapest to most expensive, prices are for the cheapest kit, although for any drone I'd recommend getting the Fly More combo, which includes 3 batteries so you can fly longer, because you'll very quickly find yourself wanting more flight time if you have just one battery. So starting all the way at the bottom end of the price range, we have the DJI Neo. This drone is $199 for the cheapest kit. That doesn't come with any kind of a remote controller. You can just take off from your hand, just push a button and it will take off and it'll follow you around. You can also have it do some other pre-programmed modes like circling around you or a droney, and you can also connect it to your phone and fly it a pretty short distance away. The range is not going to be very good just a few hundred feet. You can also buy separately a regular controller for it, but in my opinion, it's not the best option as a regular drone. It's mostly designed as just a little follow me drone to follow you around. For that, it is great, but if you're looking for a more traditional drone that you can fly at a longer distance with a remote, the next option is the DJI Mini 4K. It's $299 for the cheapest kit. This is the cheapest regular drone with a remote that I would recommend buying, and then going up from there, we have the Mini 3. It's significantly newer and better than the Mini 4K, has a lot better camera. Then moving on up from there, there's the Mini 4 Pro at $759. It's the latest, highest end drone under 249 grams, and the cheapest drone I can recommend for high quality professional video. Then going up from there, there's the Air 3 and Air 3S, both $1,099 for the cheapest kit, although you can find the Air 3 for less than that. The Air 3S is the newer version of the Air 3, upgraded with a little bit better camera. Both have two cameras, a main wide angle camera and a 3x telephoto camera, and they're much bigger drones than a mini sized drone like the Mini 3, Mini 4 Pro, or Mini 4K. And then going on up from there, there's the Mavic 3 Pro starting at $2,199. It's top of the line drone with three cameras, a wide angle camera, and 3x and 7x telephoto cameras. And then there's the Mavic 3 Classic, which is only $1,399. It's basically the Mavic 3 Pro with the two telephoto cameras left out, only one camera and a lot cheaper. And then on the super high end, there's the Inspire 3. It's $16,499, closer to $20K by the time you get the full kit. And this is what they use to shoot high-end commercials and even movies with, and it's definitely not a drone that you want to get to start out, and also probably out of the price range for most people. So now let's talk about what features matter when you're choosing between drones. And I have a completely free DJI drone comparison chart that shows exactly which of these drones have which of these features, and link to that is in the description. First up, we have video resolution. 4K is the minimum that you'll want to have for professional results. All the drones that I mentioned in this video shoot in at least 4K. Some drones like the Mavic 3 Pro have even higher resolutions like 5K, which can be nice for some things, but it's not essential for 99% of uses. And then next up is frame rate. This is basically how many individual photos or frames are compressed into 1 second of video. 30 frames per second is fine for most drone shots. 60 frames per second is a nice option to have. It lets you slow down your footage to half speed. It's great for filming faster action where there's something that you might want to slow down. And then some drones have 4K all the way up at 100 or 120 frames per second. This is great for slowing down really fast action like birds, wildlife, etc. It's not essential. I use it pretty rarely, but it is really nice to have. And some drones can also shoot at 200 or 240 frames per second in full HD, but the quality is usually too bad to be useful. The next thing you'll want to pay attention to is sensor size. This is one of the biggest things that will make a difference in the quality of your drone shot. The bigger the image sensor on a drone or a camera, usually the better quality the footage is going to be. The lowest end drones, like for example the Mini 4K, have a 1/1.23 inch sensor. The way sensor sizes are notated are super confusing, but that's a really tiny sensor. All the way up to the Mavic 3 Pro on the high end has a 4/3 inch sensor, which is far bigger. With a bigger sensor, you get more detail, less noise or graininess. It's better in low light, usually has better overall quality, and has better dynamic range, which is how well you can see both bright and dark areas in your shot at the same time. And dynamic range is going to be one of the biggest things that separates a super cheap drone like the Neo or the Mini 4K from a higher end drone like an Air 3S or Mavic 3 Pro. Another really nice feature is telephoto cameras. Up until a couple years ago, all drones pretty much had one single wide angle camera, and now several drones like the Air 3 and Air 3S and Mavic 3 Pro and Mavic 3 have a telecamera, which allows you to get closer to your subject while staying further away. I absolutely love telecameras on drones. They let you get a totally different perspective, compress the subject in the background, enhance parallax, and just overall make your shots feel more grand and epic, as well as filming shots like wildlife or chasing a car from a further distance so you're less likely to crash or disturb the subject. A 3 times telephoto camera is the most useful, but some drones also have a 7 times telephoto camera, but that camera usually isn't quite as good quality. Another important spec to pay attention to is what color profiles the drone has. Now, if you're just getting started, not going for professional cinematic video, the normal color profile that all the drones have is going to be just fine, but for more advanced cinematic videos, color profile actually matters quite a bit. The normal color profile adds a lot of contrast and saturation to the footage to make it look good straight out of the drone, but especially on some drones that causes you to lose a lot of detail in the highlights and shadows and doesn't give you nearly as much flexibility to color grade your shots. So then there's also D-Log and D-Log M color profiles. These are a lot flatter, have a lot less contrast and saturation. You have to add that contrast and saturation in post, but you have a lot more color grading flexibility, and they also keep more dynamic range than normal color profile. And then many drones also have a hybrid log gamma option, which is somewhere in between the two. The very cheapest drones like the Neo, Mini 4K, and Mini 3 only have normal color profile, whereas the better higher end drones have both D-Log and hybrid log gamma color profiles. Another thing you'll want to pay attention to, especially if you're wanting to shoot photos with your drone, is what the resolution of the photos they produce is. Most of these drones are going to shoot 12 megapixel photos. Some with a bigger sensor like the Air 3S or Mavic 3 Pro are going to shoot 20 megapixel photos. Now on quite a few drones like the Air 3S, Mini 4 Pro, etc., DJI inflates the megapixel numbers by doing some fancy trickery on the sensor that basically splits up pixels into smaller pixels. So for example, the Air 3 has both a 12 megapixel and a 48 megapixel mode, but usually the 48 megapixel mode is not that much better quality and is nowhere near 48 megapixels on a regular camera. So just be aware that when really high megapixel numbers are claimed, it's not always quite as good as it sounds. Another thing that might be important to you is vertical video shooting options. Some drones let you flip the gimbal to vertical and shoot vertical photos and videos with the full resolution of the sensors, whereas others will just crop into the horizontal 4x3 sensor to give you a vertical frame. Personally, I'm not super big on vertical video, but if you're creating a lot of content for vertical video platforms like Instagram or TikTok, this could be super important. Then moving past camera features, there's some other things that you'll want to pay attention to, starting with battery life or flight time. How long will the drone fly for on one battery? Most of these drones have at least a 30-minute flight time, but some of them, like the Air 3 and Air 3S, have on up to around a 45-minute flight time. You never actually get the flight time that these drones are rated for because it's measured in a controlled environment with no wind and flying at the optimal speed, but in general, the longer the flight time, the better. Another factor to keep in mind is the weight of the drones. Drones under 249 grams, like the Mini series or the Neo, have less restrictions in most countries. All of the Mini series drones, as well as the DJI Neo, are under 249 grams, but most of the other drones like the Air 3, Air 3S, and Mavic series are significantly over that. And once you're over 249 grams, weight isn't a huge issue. The only other consideration besides regulations is that sub 250 gram drones are a lot easier to carry around if you're traveling or especially hiking. They're a lot less weight in your pack than a drone that's around 750 grams like the Air 3 or Air 3S, or a Mavic that's on up at 900 grams. Another feature to look out for is active track and spotlight mode. Active track basically lets you select a subject on the remote, like a person or a car or a boat, and it will just keep locked onto that subject and follow it around. It actually works quite well and is a super handy feature to have. And on drones that have active track, you also get spotlight mode, which will keep the camera locked onto any subject that you select while you fly the drone around with the sticks in any direction. And you also get point of interest mode, where you can just select yourself or another object on the remote and the drone will automatically orbit around that subject. These are super useful to make it easier to get more advanced shots, especially as a beginner. Most DJI drones do have active track and all the features that come with it, but some of the cheaper drones like the Mini 3 and Mini 4K don't. Another super useful feature that not all drones have is obstacle avoidance. This basically uses sensors all around the outside of the drone to look around the drone, see any obstacles, and not run into them. The cheapest drones, like again the Mini 3 and Mini 4K, don't have any obstacle avoidance sensors. Some, like the older Mini 3 Pro, have only forward and backward sensors, but most newer drones like the Mini 4 Pro, the Air series, and Mavic series have 360-degree obstacle avoidance. Now, obstacle avoidance isn't perfect. Don't trust it to keep you safe from crashing 100% of the time, but it's definitely saved me from multiple crashes, and especially if you're a beginner, it can definitely save you from crashes when you mess up. Another spec to pay attention to is the top speed. Bigger drones are usually going to be faster. For example, the Air 3 and Air 3S max out around 47 miles per hour, whereas the Mini 4 Pro, which is a sub 250 gram drone, maxes out at 35 miles per hour. I personally like fast drones. I can get more speedy shots, and I can get the drone to where I want it a lot faster, and it also increases wind resistance. And you don't have to fly at the max speed with any of these drones. On the remote, there's a little switch between Cine mode, normal mode, and sport mode. Cine mode makes the drone go really, really slow. Normal mode makes it go just normal speed. And then sport mode lets you fly it at the max speed, although it does disable obstacle avoidance. Another thing to keep in mind is what the control range of a drone is, how far away you can fly it. The range of all current DJI drones is quite good. Usually you're going to be out of the line of sight before you have range issues, but in places with a lot of radio frequency interference, like in cities, or if you're flying around a lot of trees that might be blocking a direct line of sight to the drone at some times, stronger is going to be better. Just in general, it's going to be less likely to cut out and make you crash because the video feed on your remote all of a sudden froze. The most recent DJI drones have OcuSync for image transmission, which is incredible, and all relatively recent DJI drones do great in the range department. Another factor to keep in mind is how loud the drone is. In general, smaller drones like the Mini series are going to be a lot quieter than bigger drones like the Air series or Mavic series. Now, one exception to that is even small drones like the Neo or Avata can be really loud because of their very, very tiny high-speed props compared to an actually larger drone, like for example a drone in the Mini series, which has larger props that don't have to spin as fast and therefore aren't nearly as loud and annoying. And in my opinion, the quieter a drone is, the better. It draws less attention to you when you're flying, less likely to annoy people, all around a win-win. And finally, one more thing you need to know is what remote you're getting with your drone. You can either get a DJI RC2 or RC remote for older drones, which has a built-in screen, or you can get an RCN2 or RCN3 or RCN1 for older drones, where you have to attach your phone to the remote to use as a screen. I much prefer the DJI RC2 to a remote like this where you have to use your phone, because it's just much less of a hassle to just be able to fire up your remote and be ready to go immediately than to have to pull out the top, get your phone in there connected, and then fool around with this little cable and get it out and plug it into your drone, and the phone is on the wrong way. I've got to pull it back out, and now my cord is on the wrong way, and there we go. And now I still have to fire up my app and get that all connected, and if I get a call or text during the flight, it can disrupt my flight experience. So all in all, do these remotes where you use your phone to fly work? Yes, they work just fine, but I much prefer having a built-in screen on the remote. Now, you don't have to get one of these with your drone when you initially get it. You can get one aftermarket, but you can get them bundled with most DJI drones, and in general, I would recommend it. So now that we've covered all of the different features that you'll want to pay attention to, what they mean, whether they're important, I'm finally ready to give you my recommendation for what drone you should get. Now, one little note before I do that, there's basically two kinds of people who want to get drones. First, there's people who just want to get a drone, have fun with it, fly it around, but they aren't really planning to do serious high quality photography or video with it or use it professionally. And then there are those who are getting the drone for shooting video or photos, to make drone videos or use the drone shots in other videos that they're making, or even offer their services professionally. Now, if you're one of those who just want to have fun with a drone and fly it around and aren't particularly interested interested in shooting high quality video with drones, most of the differences in camera specs and quality aren't going to be super relevant to you because all of the drones have pretty decent cameras. So with all that said, if you're a complete beginner who just wants to dip their toes into drones, you're not sure if you want to get a higher end drone or spend too much, your best options are going to be the Mini 4K at $299 or the Mini 3 at $419. Both of these drones are under 249 grams, which means that in the US for personal hobbyist use, you don't have to register them. They both shoot 4K video, but the Mini 3 will give you far better quality because it has a larger sensor with much better dynamic range. The Mini 3 also lets you flip the camera to vertical to shoot vertical video for social media. So if you want to shoot social media content, the Mini 3 is a great budget choice that shoots pretty decent footage. The Mini 3 is rated at 38 minutes flight time versus the Mini 4 at 31 minutes. And for the Mini 3, you can get bigger batteries, which will bump the flight time on up to 51 minutes, although that will put the drone over the 249 gram limit. Now, neither of these drones has obstacle avoidance or active track, which are major limitations, but if you're looking for a solid beginner drone under $500 and aren't looking for the best video quality, the Mini 3 is my top pick. Now, I didn't include the DJI Neo in this category, even though it starts at just $199, because it is designed to be a little follow-me drone that can be used without a remote controller, and if that's what you want, it's perfect. But if you're looking for a more traditional drone to fly with a remote, I'd go for the Mini 4K or Mini 3 over the Neo. So then moving on up, there's the Mini 4 Pro at $759. This is the cheapest drone that can shoot what I'd consider professional quality video, and the best drone under 249 grams. It has the same size image sensor as the Mini 3, but it's an upgraded sensor with some extra software trickery that gives you much better image quality than the Mini 3. It also caps out at 4K, but it goes up to 4K 60 frames per second instead of maxing out at 30 frames per second, and it also has a 4K 100 frames per second slow motion mode as well. Plus, it has D-Log M and Hybrid Log Gamma color profiles, which are really important for creating the best quality videos and are lacking on all of the cheaper drones that we've discussed so far. And it also has all of the features and bells and whistles the cheaper drones don't have. It has 360-degree obstacle avoidance, active track, spotlight, point of interest mode, waypoints, has double the control range of the Mini 3. The battery life is slightly lower at 45 minutes versus 50 minutes with the larger extended flight time battery, and like the Mini 3, it lets you flip the camera to vertical for vertical social media videos. So the Mini 4 Pro is what I'd recommend if you want to shoot high quality videos and photos and want to stick with a sub 250 gram drone, either for regulations or for being easy to carry with you if you're hiking or traveling a lot with it. And it's also what I'd recommend if you want to shoot a lot of vertical videos for social media and want great photo and video quality. And the Mini 4 Pro is fully capable of doing professional work, shooting video clips to go in most types of videos, shooting real estate, etc., etc. And then moving on up a little bit more, there's the Air 3 and Air 3S, both starting at $1,099. The Air 3S has an upgraded camera and sensors and a few other small updates over the Air 3. So unless you can either get a great deal on the Air 3 or can't get the Air 3S, which has been a bit of an issue because of some customs issues DJI's been having, you might as well go with the newer Air 3S between the two, and the Air 3S is what I'd recommend. The Air 3S is quite a bit bigger than all of the previous drones we've been talking about. It has two cameras, both a 24mm wide angle camera like all of the smaller drones, and a 3x 70mm telephoto camera, which none of the smaller drones have. The wide angle camera has a 1-inch sensor, which is significantly larger than the Mini 4 Pro and also larger than the Air 3, and gives a decent bump in image quality. And the 3x telecamera has the same size image sensor as is on the Mini 4 Pro's wide angle camera, which is also the same size sensor that the Air 3 had. It's also got all the same bells and whistles as the Mini 4 Pro: D-Log M, obstacle avoidance, active track, spotlight, point of interest, waypoint, slow motion at 4K 120 frames per second instead of 100 frames per second on the Mini 4 Pro and Air 3. All of that good stuff. and it's significantly faster at 47 miles per hour versus only 35 miles per hour for the Mini 4 Pro. And because of that, it has far better wind resistance as well. And for photos, you get 20 megapixels instead of 12 megapixels on the Mini 4 Pro, and the flight time is basically the same as the Mini 4 Pro as well. Now, the only real downside of the Air 3S is that it's bigger and heavier, so it's not as super easy to transport or hike with. But all of the current DJI drones are actually pretty easy to carry around because they fold down from a big drone like this into a pretty compact package that you can throw in your backpack without too much trouble. All in all, the Air 3S is currently my favorite drone, and it's what I would recommend as the best value for the price if you're looking for a high quality camera drone to shoot video with. One of the main reasons I'd recommend the Air 3S over the Mini 4 Pro for most people is the 3x telephoto camera. If you look at helicopter shots in movies and high-end productions, they're more often than not using a longer focal length to create more depth compression and parallax instead of using a wide-angle lens, and the 3x telephoto camera on the Air 3S and Air 3 lets you create a similar effect, which really opens up the possibilities of the types of shots you can get. A longer focal length makes things in the background look a lot bigger compared to the foreground, and it makes it all look closer together, which makes the shots look more grand and epic. And the longer focal length makes it so you can stay further away from what you're filming and still get a close shot, which is great, for example, shooting wildlife or following a car, and you'll be less likely to crash or disturb the subject. So all in all, the Air 3S gets you two cameras, great quality, 4K, good low light image quality, high resolution photos, great speed, great battery life, great color grading flexibility, some of the best obstacle avoidance out there, and all of the latest features for a pretty reasonable price. So for that reason, it gets my top spot as my #1 recommended camera drone for most people. Now moving on up from there, there's the Mavic 3 Classic at $1,399. It has an even larger 4/3 sensor compared to the Air 3S. It shoots 5.1K video at up to 50 frames per second, is great in low light, has an adjustable aperture, which lets you adjust the amount of light coming into the camera, and all in all is going to have somewhat better image quality than the Air 3S, but it only has one wide-angle camera, and personally I don't think it's worth getting over the Air 3S for an extra $300 and losing a telephoto camera. The difference in image quality isn't going to be noticeable for most use cases anyway, especially since social media heavily compresses videos. Now, if you don't care about having a telephoto camera and just want the best wide-angle camera quality, it is a decent option, but for most of you, I think I'd skip it. And then finally, on the top end is the Mavic 3 Pro at $2,199. It's basically the Mavic 3 Classic with two extra cameras added, a 3x and 7x telephoto camera. It's the best of the best quality wide-angle camera. The 3x camera is actually not quite as good quality as the Air 3S, but pretty good nonetheless. The drone has all of DJI's bells and whistles, from 360 obstacle avoidance to active track to waypoints, but at $2,199, twice the price of the Air 3S, it's a bit hard to justify the massive jump in price for a comparatively small increase in quality. If you want the best of the best image quality wise, the Mavic 3 Pro is the drone for you, but for most people, the Air 3S is going to be a lot better value for your money. So there are my top recommendations for each price range and use case. Now, if you're wanting to save a bit on some of these drones, one great place to look is DJI Refurbished. They have most of these drones for a bit lower price. For example, right now you can get the Mini 4 Pro for $150 less, the Mavic 3 Pro for $350 less, and the older Air 3, which is still a great drone, for just $879 instead of $1,099. And DJI Refurbished gear is certified to be fully functional and in good condition and has a full warranty, so it's a great way to save a bit on your drones without compromising quality or having to go through the hassle of trying to find one on Facebook Marketplace or eBay, make sure it's in good quality and you're not getting scammed and all that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, for all of these drones, I recommend getting the Fly More combo, which includes 3 batteries instead of 1, and usually some other accessories like a case and ND filters and charging hub, because it's quite a bit cheaper than getting everything separately. And if you get just 1 battery, you'll pretty quickly start wishing that you had a couple extras. And another thing to keep in mind is that, as I mentioned earlier, all of these drones fly the same. The Mavic 3 Pro is going to be just as easy to fly as the Mini 4K, so there's no need to start with a cheap drone and then work your way up to a better drone. If what you really want to to end up with is a higher end model. You can go ahead and start with whichever of these drones you want. The only downside is that you'll have more cash flying through the air ready to crash and get destroyed. Speaking of which, if you're getting your first drone or just aren't super comfortable flying them, I do recommend getting DJI Care crash insurance with your drone. You can purchase it for either 1 or 2 years. For example, for the Air 3S, it's an extra $109 for 1 year and $189 for 2 years. And with the 1-year plan, you can get it replaced up to 2 times for $99 for each replacement. And with the 2-year plan, you can get it replaced up to 4 times, again for only $99 for each replacement. And if you completely lose the drone and can't get it back even in pieces to send back to DJI, you can get it replaced for $429 instead of the full price, up to 1 time if you're on the 1-year plan and up to 2 times if you're on the 2-year plan. So getting DJI Care just gives you a little bit of extra peace of mind to know that if you mess up and crash and destroy your drone, I just crashed. You haven't lost your entire investment, and it'll help you to be less nervous when you're learning and flying. And guys, whatever drone you get, if you don't know how to use it, you won't be getting amazing shots like what you see online in the DJI launch videos from all the YouTubers. So as I mentioned, that's why I made a totally free 45-minute training showing how to get professional cinematic shots with your drone. Link to it is in the description. Make sure to watch it, or if you don't have a drone yet, bookmark it and make sure to come back and watch it once you've gotten your drone. And finally, back at the beginning of this video, I said I would also talk about FPV drones. FPV drones are for getting a totally different type of footage from regular camera drones. They're for flying low and fast around obstacles, diving cliffs, through gaps, all of that. Now, I'm not an expert on FPV drones by any means. I just learned how to fly them in manual mode about 9 months ago. But if you're interested in getting these kinds of shots, the DJI Avata 2 is a great way to get started. It has all of the fail-safes and nice features of DJI drones, and you can actually fly it in full GPS mode through the goggles just like a regular drone and get a fair bit of the FPV experience, but it also lets you learn the ropes of manual FPV as well. Now, some of the main differences between FPV drones and camera drones: number 1 is it only has a 1-axis gimbal that tilts up and down, and the footage is digitally stabilized either in the drone or you can stabilize it manually in post. And number 2, it's designed to always be flying forward. You very rarely fly backwards or to the side with your FPV drone. You're always keeping it flying forwards. The Avata 2 and FPV drones in general also have way wider cameras than regular camera drones, which helps you to give the immersive first-person view effect. Now, there's several ways that you can control your Avata 2. It comes with a little wand type controller where you basically point it where you want it to go and pull the trigger. Some people really like it. Personally, I don't like it super well, probably in part because I'm super used to flying drones with the sticks on a regular remote, and the motion controller wand also limits how you can fly the drone. You can't, for example, dive down a cliff or a building or a waterfall like all the FPV shots you see on YouTube and Instagram. It gives you a fair bit of an immersive flying experience, but you're way more limited in the movements that you can control it to do. And then you can also get separately the FPV Remote Controller 3, which lets you fly it either like a regular camera drone with the sticks in normal and sport modes, but it also lets you flip it into full manual control mode. If you've seen any cool FPV shots online, there's a 99.9% chance they were shot flying in manual mode. Now, learning to fly in manual mode is a much bigger learning curve than flying regular camera drones. You need to first practice in a simulator on the computer and then practice a lot in real life to get good at it. So it's really a whole separate topic outside of this video. I have another video showing my first 2 weeks of learning to fly FPV in manual mode. So if you want to check that out, it'll be linked somewhere either up here or down in the description. So the Avata 2 is a great way to dip your toes into FPV, get into it without some of the complications of regular FPV drones. But one big downside of it is that, as with most of these DJI drones, the altitude is limited to about 1,600 feet above the takeoff point. Now, most of the time, this is not a problem because you're only allowed to fly 400 feet above the ground anyway. But if you want to dive mountains, it becomes a huge issue because most mountains are over 1,600 feet tall. And with with the Avata, when you're flying up the side of the mountain, when it hits 1600 feet elevation, it just stops and won't go any higher. So the Avata 2 is a great way to get into FPV drones. It's a huge amount of fun to fly. I totally love it, but it's definitely not a complete replacement for traditional FPV quads. So there you have my top recommendations for what drone to get. Links to all the drones I mentioned will be down in the description. I've got a bunch of videos on the channel showing how to get the best results with your drone and giving more info on some of the drones that I've mentioned. So make sure to check those out and subscribe to see more videos like this.